disconnect your negative side of the battery. Take that terminal right off. Make sure it stays clear from being able to hit that battery. 10mm wrench or socket. Remove your oil filter. Make sure you have a catch basin underneath it. Now we can pull the drain plug to drain the oil out of the engine. That's a 17mm wrench or socket. Make sure you have a catch basin. All right, so we drained most of the oil out, so now we're just going to put the plug back in so we don't make a mess of the floor. And then we can move on to taking the exhaust down. I'm just going to snug it by hand. So first thing we have to do is remove these 3 nuts from the front pipe to the manifold pipe. And that's a 14mm socket. Now we're going to take the actual manifold off of the heads. There's 3 studs and nuts on both sides, both heads. We have one here, one there, and then one right in the center. I'm going to loosen this nut up and not take it completely down until I'm ready to take it all the way off. 14mm socket. Let's break them free. I do not use air when it comes to Subaru studs to the head because it's an aluminum head and you can take a chance of stripping them. You want to feel this. So far so good, all 3 broke free. Let's loosen this one up. Sometimes the whole stud might be coming out with the nut, which is fine because we can clean them up to reinstall. You can take all 3 of those out. Now the passenger side, we've got 3, same location, one in the center, one on the outside on the corner, another one on the front part. Same size, 14mm socket. I'm just going to leave that center one loose. I'm going to take the air breather damper off so that I can get to the O2 sensor connectors easier. Just use a body trim tool. Pull those 2 out and lift it up right out of the way. Now we're going to follow the O2 sensors up. We have a gray connector and a black connector. Just going to squeeze that tab and pull. Same with the gray. Then we have 2 lock tabs down here. I'm just going to get a pair of needle nose and pop those out. So now I have the engine hoist on. I'm just supporting the front bracket here. You've got a hole that actually is for lifting the engine up. And over here I just put a chain around the aluminum intake. I'm not going to be putting tons of stress on that. That's just to try to keep it as level as possible. Now we're going to raise it back up and take that front manifold pipe down and undo the motor mounts. Now we're going to take the passenger side exhaust stud out. This front pipe will hold it up in the air to a certain point so that we can take the other side off and not have it drop down on us. Now we can take this exhaust stud out, and we'll see the exhaust start to fall down, so I'm just going to support it with my hand. Take that stud out. Now we have the 3 studs in on this front pipe. The O2 sensors are still in, but the lines are disconnected. We're going to manipulate this up and out. Try not to ever hit O2 sensors because they're very sensitive. So now I'm going to take a 14mm socket and I'm going to take this mount nut off and the same one on the passenger side. That way we can hoist that engine up enough to get to those back bolts up on top of that engine support. So now that the mounts are disconnected, we're up on the top again, lower the car down, and I'm just going to turn these until I start lifting the engine up enough at a tilt so that I can get to the back side of those oil pans. So now we have all of these oil pan bolts that look pretty rusted, so we might end up replacing some, but for now I'm just going to start taking them off. 10mm socket, and I've got a little magnet tray that I'm going to pop them in. This pan should not just drop down anyways because it's got silicone sealant for a gasket, so we're going to have to probably give it a little bit of pry to come off. Yeah, that one's stripped. 10mm swivel, like I said. Let's see if we can get these back oil pan bolts. I might just take these completely out while I'm back here. So now I just switched over to a 1/4" swivel extension, 1/4" 3/4 deep 10mm socket. Had to get a straight angle on those back bolts. Let's see. I'm just going to take the rest of the ones down that I already loosened up. So anytime you run into any nuts or bolts that are rounded off, they call these twisty sockets. You can pick them up pretty low price. So that's what I'm going to use on my last 3. They're so rusted that a socket won't fit on there. And I'm going to set those aside because I'm going to replace those. So like I said, the oil pan is stuck from the sealant that is used, so I'm just going to take a pry bar and pop it down like that. All right, so I sprayed it, let it soak some. Let's see if we can, wish me luck. All right, so I put a pair of lock pliers on it. The pan's being replaced anyway, so let's see what we can do. There we go. Yay. So now you have 1, 2, 3 bolts for this pickup screen that has to come down. 10mm socket. Just break it free. Make sure you keep these separate from the actual oil pan bolt. You can see the pan's going to start dropping, so pay attention to that. You don't want to drop that. It could make a mess. When you take the old pan down, you see this gasket right here. Make sure it's attached to the pan and not stuck up in that oil port. I'm just going to take that oil pickup screen down the rest of the way. And once again, there's another O-ring there. Make sure it's not torn or stuck up in there. So now the pan's down, we can clean the surface that the new pan's going to attach to. I like to use a scraper. I don't like a razor blade on aluminum. You've got to be very delicate with it. I've seen it actually dig in. In this case, it might not matter too much if you just digs in a little bit, due to the fact that you're using RTV sealer instead of an actual gasket. It'll fill that in, but whatever you got to scrape, but just make sure you get all the stuff gone, because believe it or not, the old stuff could cause a problem with the new stuff, and you want a good seal. You don't want to do this job again. Get that nice and soaked and brake clean. And I'll just run it right over the surface. You can have no oil residue at all when you go to put this RTV up. That's the last thing you want in the way. Now I'm going to take my RTV and I'm going to put about 1/8 of an inch of bead all the way around. And within a good 10 minutes, you got to get this up and bolted and torqued. So this is a quick process in the next couple of stages. And now on the dipstick tube, those O-rings, I didn't get a new set, but these look pretty good. They're not torn. So I'm just going to put a silicone paste or anything oil-based. You can do Vaseline, something that's going to let that slide into the new tube on that oil pan easier. Put that up in there like that. I'm going to grab that. I got my bolts here. Try to get one started at least. Okay, you torque the pickup screen to 4.7 foot-pounds. All 3 bolts. Okay, we're going to set this up there. Don't forget to put it in the dipstick tube. And then line it up. There we go. And now we can hopefully line up at least one bolt hole in the front. And now I got a speed wrench to do this. It's kind of old school, but boy, they're nice. I'm just going to now just speed wrench them right in until I need to get my swivel for the back. Now I've moved on to my swivel section. I want to make sure I get that straight on there. You do not want to cross thread. So the torque on this oil pan has 3 passes to it, which makes sense. First one's 3.6, then 4.7, then 7.2. So I'm going to crisscross pattern. I'm going to start over here. That is 3.7 foot-pounds, 4.7 foot-pounds, then 7.2 foot-pounds. And the reason you go from the center out is to squeeze any of that RTV in an even pattern. Now I gotta get my swivel. Once again, I'm going to start on the side and go back and forth. Don't expect to get too much out of it because it's not much of a torque change. Now I'm going to start the 7.2 foot-pounds, the last torque all the way around. I'm just giving it one last confirmation, all of them 7.2. All right, so now while that pan is drying, the RTV, I'm going to lower the engine back down so those mounts go through that cross member, and I can tighten everything up from down below. Now I'm going to put the dipstick back in. So now that the engine's sitting back in the cradle, we can put our washers and nuts back on these mounts. This is a 14mm socket. We're going to snug them up and then torque it to spec. $14mm socket, and the torque specs is 63 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to reinstall an oil filter. I'm putting a new filter on. You can choose what you want, but we gotta do an oil change. And I'm just going to double check the new drain plug, make sure it's tight. Now we're going to put that front converter manifold pipe back up. I think I'm going to go passenger side first. Like that. I'm going to get the 3 nuts and see if I can get those started. Always remember never to tighten anything until everything's bolted up in. All right, now I'm going to get gasket and bolt for this side. I'm going to put the old gasket back up in there. I'm going to put one stud up. Hopefully we can get one started. I got the front one started. Just get it, don't tighten it too much or snug it, because you're going to need this whole exhaust pipe to dance around to get everything lined up. Now I'm going to place the gasket up there. Put the stud through. There we go. Now let's just and now I'm just going to snug the 3 for the front pipe to the manifold. Exhaust studs and nuts to the head for the exhaust is 22.4 foot-pounds. And once again, that's our 14mm socket. I'm going to do both sides, and then we'll do another quick pass. And now the 3 exhaust studs to front pipe, 29.5 foot-pounds. 14mm socket. Just double check. So now we're just going to take the O2 sensor wires and just try to guide them up enough so that we can grab them from up top and lock them into place. All right, so now we've lowered the car. We have the 2 O2 sensors right here, and as you can see, they're different connectors, so you can't mess them up. The 4-1 post is going to go to the outer one. Push it until it clicks, and then this 6-wire, well, it's 4-wire, but the bigger connector. And then bring it your hand down. Make sure you put these clips back in. Now we can put our air feed to our air filter back in place. Last thing to do, well, almost last, is put oil in. The Subaru takes 4.4 quarts of 530. So now all the oil is in, we're going to put the cover back on, snug it, and now all we got to do is put that negative battery cable back on. 10mm wrench. So now the battery's connected, everything's all done, oil's full. We're going to start her up and check for leaks.